Is crying a sign of weakness, or can it actually be a sign of strength? Can it just be a sign that someone is experiencing the beauty of life? I think it can probably be many, many things. And today, I just want to share my experience, my perspective, and I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag immediately that I don't think crying is a sign of weakness. I think that some of the most beautiful moments of my life have been accompanied by tears, either my own tears or the tears of the person that I'm sitting across from. And I will admit that I'm kind of an advocate for the acceptance of crying and the reassessment of what it even is and what it means and how beautiful and important and amazing of a phenomena it can be. And the topic got stirred to the forefront of my mind because a while ago I joined the mailing list of a popular male influencer named Andrew Tate. Some of the people listening to this or watching this will be familiar with Andrew Tate. Some people won't. Essentially, at the moment, he's a very popular male influencer. He's a proponent of very traditional masculine values. And he's risen to prominence by saying kind of like offensive, outrageous, inflammatory things about men and women. And I joined his mailing list because I like to expose myself to ideas that are really different from my own. So, kind of almost as a joke, I joined Andrew Tate's mailing list to see what I would be getting. And a couple of weeks ago, I got an email, and I think the headline or the subject line was, "I don't trust crying men," or "I don't trust men that cry." And the basic premise of the email was that men who cry are men who can't control their emotions, and you can't trust a man that can't contain his feelings and just be stoic and get down to business in life. It's irresponsible. And we have this culture that's encouraging men to be more soft, more vulnerable, to cry and be weak and unreliable. And it was an interesting argument and message to receive as a man who has spent years quite intentionally tapping into my vulnerability and turning towards the tears, letting myself fall apart and cry in the right circumstances where that's like a healthy, appropriate thing. Sometimes at least. Hopefully. Um, yeah, so, and as a writer, anybody who's watching this or listening to it that has read my book, How to Open the Heart, it knows that it's just a long story that is just the story of someone taking down their armor, unraveling that stoicism, that traditional masculine armor, and exploring those watery feelings underneath. And I think one person who read it posted a review that called it uncomfortably mushy, which I thought was like, and they were saying that in a positive way. They gave it a 5-star review and they called it uncomfortably mushy. And I never thought of it that way because over the years, that became so normal to me, turning towards the tears, turning towards the vulnerability. That became like a discipline or a martial art or something. Not to say that I learned some form of mastery, just that I got led down a path, or I chose a path where it was like the scary thing is to feel certain feelings. To be stoic and invulnerable and keep these walls up between myself and my feelings, between myself and other people, that's not the scary thing. There's this kind of warrior voice inside of me that pushes me towards the vulnerability. It's like, Miles, you have to feel this feeling because you would be a coward if you turned away from it. Take down that armor. Tell that person what's on your heart right now. Because to hide that vulnerability is actually the coward's path. So for me, I have this different perspective where to turn towards the vulnerability is often the strongest thing. it's actually not a weakness, but actually it's to choose to turn towards the fire, the terrifying feelings, and learn how to hold that, learn how to let that flow. So that's my perspective and my bias, I guess. And I kind of understand the perspective that was put forward in that email, that a person who doesn't have some ability to control their emotions and just falls apart into a pool of tears spontaneously, a person who is just at the mercy of their emotions, that's not a very fun thing. But my experience has been that by turning towards the vulnerability, the tears, the feelings in certain contexts, like within the confines of a certain type of relationship, or within the confines of a meditation session or emotional work or what have you, to let myself take down the guards and let myself into the vulnerability and the tears in those moments, I think it's made me more responsible and stronger when I go back into life. It's given me, it's like, instead of having all these unexamined feelings and this stoicism that's just like covering them up, um, I've learned that I can feel a range of emotion and come back to my center. I can let myself totally fall apart and cry. And then here I am, I'm still here. The tears are gone. Like, I let it happen and I'm still here. And there was a moment in time a number of years ago where I was hesitant to let myself go into some really deep, vulnerable place within me, because I talk about it in my book, How to Open the Heart. I felt like if I let myself cry in a certain way, I would never stop. I would just fall apart. I would just come undone. And I told this to a friend, and he was like, you'll probably just cry as long as you need to. You're not going to cry forever. You're going to cry until you're done. And that was very true. When I finally let go and let myself go into some feelings I'd been carrying, and let the stream flow, let the tears flow, it felt like I lost control, because there was such a kind of backlog of emotion. But once I made a practice of letting myself do that, letting myself go there, I think over time it got a lot easier for me to like bounce in and out of certain places emotionally. And I have an example of this that happened over the past year. And it happened at work. I work as a server in a restaurant in the evenings. And this is a while ago, but within the past year, it was the start of a shift. There was something that had happened that felt kind of frustrating and unfair, about the way that the shift was organized. And so I went to a manager and I just shared, hey, this seems a little bit off. This seems unfair. I just want to let you know that. And I think I had more of a charge of frustration when I shared that with my manager than I realized at the time, because they like snapped back at me. They got very reactive and kind of like pushed back, and I was really shocked. I was not prepared for it to turn into a conflict, essentially, just like that. So, I guess I had a bit of a charge. They came back with a strong charge, and then I was just like stunned. And I had opened up this conflict, and I was like, I think you're kind of raising your voice at me. This doesn't feel good. And then that made them even more kind of upset, because they thought I was just kind of being passive aggressive. And yeah, I just basically, I was completely stunned, stumbled out of their office, and I was like, holy shit, that person hates me right now. This isn't good. And and then it was the beginning of my shift, so I stumble onto the floor of the restaurant, kind of feeling the discomfort of having such a raw conflict with somebody in the workplace. And I'm thinking, man, I need to follow up with them. I need to like smooth this out and make peace so it's not gnawing at me throughout the rest of this shift. So I track them down like 10 minutes later and I say, hey, something happened there. Do you want to talk it out? And is everything okay? And they were still really upset, and they just started laying into me and saying, look, what you did there was not okay. You can't talk to me like that. And they were very upset, super like emotionally charged, letting me have it. And I was just stunned. I was like, damn, okay, I clearly came with frustration I didn't know I had. And it sparked a fire in this person. And this is like a huge, like, they really are hating me right now. And so I just listened, and I was like, okay, thanks for sharing. And I walked away. And at that moment, my pride is triggered. I'm like a part of me wants to yell at them. But I'm realizing that would be a very foolish mistake at this point. And that if there's anything to do, it's just completely kiss this person's butt, own that I set off this whole thing by feeling frustrated and annoyed at something that really didn't matter, and probably coming to them with an emotional charge that just set this whole thing off. So I was like, okay, Miles, swallow your pride. This is your practice in life. You got to own that you were triggered to start this whole thing off, and just apologize unequivocally with no conditions to this person, and see if that can smooth it out. Because again, this is the start of a shift, and I don't want to carry this conflict. I went and I apologized, no conditions. I just said, you know what? I'm sorry. This is my fault. I came in to your office. I obviously had more of a bad attitude than I realized, and I just want to apologize. And that, and I really did, since I was like, I just got to put aside my ego and my pride and just apologize with no conditions, no buts, no ands, no qualifications. And that apology seemed like it was received, and they shared a little bit about, they were like, you know what, thank you, and I'm sorry for having such a strong reaction, but I just felt really hurt that you had that like charge with me, because I feel like I've been looking out for you and trying to help you out. And they just shared where they were coming from, and it all made complete sense. I was like, damn, no, you're right. I'm so sorry. And it made my apology became even more sincere, because I could see the burden they were carrying in that moment, and how I had kind of come in with a negative vibe towards them. And I guess once I was vulnerable enough to say I'm sorry, they felt vulnerable enough to share why they had such a strong reaction in that moment. And it made complete sense. And I started crying, because I was feeling the connection. I was feeling like, man, I'm so sorry, and I don't want to talk to you that way. You didn't deserve that. And yeah, so I started shedding some tears, and they started shedding some tears, and and there was coworkers walking past, and again, because of the years of like intense emotional work, I had become less self-conscious about crying. I don't really feel like I need to hide it. It doesn't feel socially wrong. It feels like, again, like some of the most beautiful moments are accompanied by tears. And this was one of the most beautiful moments that I ever experienced within those four walls of that building. Um, this was a moment of realness with somebody. And, you know, 20 seconds earlier, we'd been kind of like really clashing and butting heads. And then all of a sudden, there's this moment of crying and we give each other a big hug and there's this resolution, I can totally see their like their justification and what they were feeling. It's like, damn, no, I get you. And it's okay. Like, I'm sorry that I was being an annoying like I'm sorry that I was being annoying and coming in with an emotional charge. You didn't need that. Um so it was this beautiful moment, and there was a coworker who, had seated some guests in my section of the restaurant that I was serving, and she came in and interrupted, and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Miles, but you've got a table that you need to go serve." And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." And I just dry off the tears and get to business. And again, I think because of those years, kind of in controlled circumstances, wading into those emotions of sadness and vulnerability and crying and learning how to feel it and become more comfortable with it, I was able to just snap back in to responsible getting things done mode. And it was just instantaneous. To me, it was just a reminder that crying is not a weakness. It doesn't have to be debilitating. It can just be part of this kind of kaleidoscope of feelings that make us whole and that are part of a deep life. And like I said, that was a really beautiful moment. It was a moment where I guess I was able to grow in this sense that I put aside my pride to acknowledge somebody else. And then by doing that, I got to see even more of what was behind the whole conflict, and I could see that, oh man, what a foolish thing I had done to trigger this, and it actually just made my humility and my appreciation towards that person deeper. and I don't think that the crying was in any way a weakness, although it's possible that in the past, in seasons of my life when I hadn't been going to that place of emotionality, I might not have been able to turn off the tap. It might have just started running and being like, a dam just came down, and I'm drowning. So for me, I actually think that um, finding safe spaces to explore a range of emotions, finding safe spaces to feel tears, to feel vulnerability and tenderness, I think it has made me a stronger person. And crying can mean so many things. It can, you know, in that moment with my coworker, I wasn't crying because I was hurting. I was crying because I was seeing their beauty. And I was just feeling a connection and an appreciation, and the vulnerability in me that had gotten triggered at them. Um, so it wasn't a product of pain or sadness or weakness. It was just a product of depth and this very human empathy. Of course, any emotion, if it can just sweep us off our feet and knock us down, can be a weakness. I think for me, the emotion that I would associate with weakness for me more than any is probably anger. I think anger can be quite an intense drug for me. It can just totally kind of hit me over the head and unground me and disorient me. But crying, sadness, I think turning towards tears can be one of the most courageous things when it's the right time and the right place. Turning towards vulnerability, turning towards the tears, that can be an incredibly brave thing. So I think it's way too simple to consider it a sign of weakness. And when people ridicule men or women for crying, I think they might be not seeing something. not understanding something of great significance. Anyhow, that's all I have to say about this today. If you're interested in checking out my book, you will find links to it in the description, in the show notes. And until next time, I hope that you have a beautiful day. Take care.